Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks. Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try and make your world a little weirder. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Niall. And boy, is this week. We just had Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Did you do anything fun for Valentine's Day?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. I was getting over sickness, and the woman that I am dating caught COVID, so no.
So no.
No, we didn't do anything for Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, we had to postpone that. So,
well, I hope everyone's okay.
Yeah, I mean, she's fine. I'm okay. I didn't have COVID, and like our timeline doesn't line up such that I would have given her anything or she would have given me anything. So the good news is that, I guess, but the bad news is, yeah, she had COVID. So, no Valentine's Day. We decided to postpone. I had to stay home and watch a cat. And I was researching this episode, and this cat with his mom and dad gone, my roommates, I've never seen him. He's usually very self-sufficient. Like, he spends a good chunk of his time outdoors, and he gets out a lot of his energy outdoors. But as soon as mom and dad are gone, it's like time to fuck with Kyle. I no joke, like this episode took a little longer than I had hoped because he was just coming in and headbutting me and like clawing the back of my chair and trying to jump on my desk. All so that I would come and play with him, which is adorable, but also, I mean, how can I say no? How can I say no?
I mean, it's hard to say no to an animal that just wants some attention. It's true. It's really hard. But I've been there with dogs before. I've never lived in a place with a cat.
Yeah, he's I do love the little guy, but I was like, dude, I will come toss the little yellow mouse toy around with you later. Okay, you have this.
Daddy's got to get some work done.
Daddy's got to get some work done. You have some perfectly good toys. But then, I had that moment of like, will you regret focusing on your work and not spending time with your adoptive son?
When you become a high-powered businessman in like a 90s to early 2000s drama,
yes,
and you're struggling to balance work and home, and you have to learn that maybe you can't base your entire life around your job.
Yeah. Maybe you should have played catch with your son or play a little game of cat and mouse with your cat. So that's been my week. I would like to tell you though that we do have 2 emails, which, if I'm remembering correctly, means that we did get them in under our completely arbitrary 3 email.
Did we? Okay. So we fulfilled the 3. We fulfilled the 3 email mandate.
Yeah, we did. The first one's kind of short, so I will read this one off. I'll read both of them. Is what I'm saying, and this is a good one. So here's what this email says. It's from Fletcher, and it says, "Doing my due diligence as one of the 3 emails. Thank you so much, Fletcher. Recently, in discussion of the Kennedy assassination, you guys were unsure about the date of the event. Jack got his wig blown off on November 22nd, 1963. My suggestion for a special JFK discussion event would be Lee Harvey Oz Week for the second to last week of November. What
if we did Lee Harvey Oz Week and Lee Harvey October?
Lee Harvey Oz Week. I really like Lee Harvey Oz Week, I gotta say. And
That's
yeah,
really good.
I mean, expanding it out to a full month would probably make sense. They go on to say, I got into the assassination within the last year because for reasons beyond my understanding, there's been a glut of JFK assassination YouTube videos that regurgitate the Warren report as truth. And can I just add, there's been like a weird glut of JFK assassination, just content in general. There was like that documentary last year, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was something about the anniversary plus randomly some documents were released about JFK, if you remember last year. But I sort of remember looking into it and finding people who are way more researched about it than me saying like this doesn't really tell us anything new. So it's funny. I remember around that time I was visiting my parents and my dad was like, why are they releasing this now? Like, you're the conspiracy guy. Tell me what that's about. And I was like, man, I don't know.
They're trying to throw you off the scent of all the shady shit they're doing.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's a psyop. No, but I don't know.
I don't know. But Fletcher goes on to say, I hope you weird boy crusaders can cut through the lies and contradictions and arrive at the truth that, yes, his head really did just do that. I give my regards to my second and third favorite Midwesterners. Jules is number one. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much. I just want to say also about that email, can we count Jules as being from the Midwest? Is that fair to say?
It depends on where you think the Midwest starts.
I guess it's fair.
It's I don't remember exactly how much information she's divulged on the podcast of her upbringing and where she's from, so I'm not gonna like put it on blast. But she's from a border area, so it depending on your definition, she might be an East Coaster, she might be a Midwester.
Yeah, so I guess what the point is that's up for contention, and so that would make us first and second because I think that leaves her out of the running personally.
Yeah, she might be disqualified on a technicality.
Might be disqualified here, but thank you nonetheless. So that was from Fletcher. Thank you very much, Fletcher. That was a great email. We have another one here. I wish I could read. Okay, so this is signed coffee lover. Oh, sorry. Their name is Milo. Their name is Beeschurger hey, Milo, I just want you to know I'm looking at your email here and I love your email name, but okay. I don't want to put that out into the world now. You'll have to take a look at this. I don't want anybody to be able to get your email there, but that's a very good email. And it says, Dear podcasters, I hope this email sustains and nourishes you. I have attached a screenshot of my Spotify Q&A submission as identity verification purposes, which I did look at it, and it's them. I listened only to the show until I listened to every single one before I listened to any other podcast. I did listen to music, but that doesn't count. I didn't take screenshots of my Wrapped, so I can't be exact, but I was in the top 8% of listeners that year. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of podcasts listened to. All of it was you guys. Hearing that always...
That's some dedication.
Yeah, thank you. That always... I don't even know what to say to that. Thank you. It goes on to say, my favorite part of the show is FYD. After watching a few of the documentaries after listening to the show, I was super impressed at how little a listener would need to watch them. You boys covered them so completely, even the faff in between. I had a lot of fun listening to the extraordinary episode with Mr. Starseed himself, Stan Romanek. I had watched it quite a few years ago, and getting to experience a first viewing again made me so giddy. I felt like a sinister fly rubbing my tiny grubby hands listening to your commentary when his abduction baby mama was introduced. For those who don't know, we covered Stan Romanek a long time ago. I think before we'd even hit episode 100, maybe.
I think it was that early, yeah.
And he's a fucking creep who was in the alien UFO abductee community for a while, but I do believe I think he went to jail, maybe? He's not a good guy. The email goes on to say, I almost emailed around Halloween to suggest watching An Honest Liar, the Amazing Randy documentary, but I chickened out, and one of the recent ones you mentioned you needed to give him his own episode, so I guess I don't need to do that anymore. Well, it's been a hell of a ride, guys. Thanks for the laughs. I enjoyed both the personal character development and the kayfabe character development. Looking forward to more upcoming content. With all the love I possess, Milo, 5'1" coffee lover, cryptid fucker.
Hey, that's a hell of a sign off.
That's
Milo.
amazing, and I thank you so much. Emails like that always, it's touching. And it was weird to have somebody like bring up Stan Romanek. And actually, as I was researching this and when I saw this email, I was listening to some Art Bell archives, which like one of the things that's really surreal is like, for whatever reason, I mean, not for whatever reason, but like Art Bell is in my brain as permanently in the like 90s and early 2000s. That's like that's where he exists to me. But, you forget he had shows that went clear up till like, I want to say 2016 or 2017 before he passed away. And so, I was listening to an archived episode of him talking with Stephen Greer, who you probably recognize the name.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Ufologist guy, but they were talking about Art Bell was like, it was super surreal because it was 2016 and Art Bell's talking about like, what if Trump becomes president, and like going on and on with Stephen Greer about like, well, do you think Trump would at least be able to like shake things up and like release the alien information that the government has and all this stuff? And it was very surreal. And it was surreal to have Stephen Greer be like, yeah, Stan Romanek, it may have been that he was like psyoped by secret forces from the government and like they planted things on him. So it was very weird to hear that, because I do believe Stephen Greer's whole thing, or not Stephen Greer, Romanek's whole thing that he went down for was possessing some illegal pornography, if I'm remembering correctly. So
I believe that's true. Yes.
Yeah. So total creep, and kind of weird for Stephen Greer to go to bat. It kind of sounded like Greer was going to bat for this guy, which is, again, that's very weird to me. But if everything is a conspiracy, nothing is, or whatever, who knows? Anyways, Niall, that's been my week, and those were great emails.
I'm full.
I'm sated. What can I say? But and so, Niall,
yeah,
this episode, I was thinking as I was like looking around, learning about this one, I was like, sometimes researching UFO stories online, it can feel like casting a magic spell where like you'll say the right words and you get a bunch of cool stuff, but then slightly alter those words and you find something entirely different, which I guess is just describing Google.
Okay. But I have come across stuff like that where like it, with certain cryptids, one search will get you absolutely nothing, and then a slightly different name will just get you everything.
Yeah, a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's more like, you look at you look under a rock, you're like looking for cool bugs, and you look under rocks.
Yeah, okay. I'm into this metaphor.
You look under a rock, and it's like, oh shit, there's a bunch of cool bugs, but there's like a bunch of cool bugs that I missed. And then you put the rock back down, and then you come back a few days later and you look, and there's the bugs you missed, but also there's some new bugs.
How is I've lost the metaphor here entirely. That's
okay.
That you lost me.
What I'm trying to say is I found a really wild UFO/alien abduction case from Indiana that I'd somehow not read about until I ended up researching this episode. It's especially weird because it's especially weird that we haven't talked about this one, not just because it's from our home state, but also because it has a lot of well-known ufologists and researchers at the helm. The story gets its notoriety from a book written by Budd Hopkins, one of the more notable ufologists of the 1980s and 90s, and also, for us, the guy who we couldn't stop laughing at the concept of calling him Butt Hopkins in that one episode like a year ago.
That sounds like us.
Yeah, that was in the Disney ride episode, if I remember correctly, where for whatever reason we just really, I think we were a little sleep deprived and we were like, yeah, Butt Hopkins, funniest shit I ever heard. So
I think we should do like a fucking stay up till 4 a.m. watching horror movies.
I would love that.
Record an episode, just because there's a certain like slap happiness that can be very fun on certain episodes that I don't feel I've gotten, that has been properly deployed on this show to this point.
You know what we haven't done in a long time that we avoided for a long time, but I'm currently breaking that rule right now. I'm drinking a goddamn beer while we're recording. So, and this isn't just any beer. You see that label there that says it's not normal? Yeah, that's right. This is.
I'm well acquainted with what you're drinking right now.
This is going to be good for the podcast. So, no, I don't know. I felt like drinking a beer, and so I'm going to drink this beer. And the story that we're going to talk about is the Copley Woods incident and the woman at the center of it all, whose name is Debbie Jordan-Kauble.
Okay.
Who hails from Kokomo.
At some point, okay, I was gonna say at some point in this episode, you're gonna like say the name of my fucking like first grade teacher or something, and I'm gonna be like, and I'm going to lose my mind.
That is, but, reading stories like this from Indiana is what it's like. And there was a really, really weird moment actually where I was listening to an interview with Deborah, and she was talking to a guy who runs, this will come up later. She was talking to a guy who runs a radio show out in LA, but he's from Indiana, named Jimmy Church. And in the interview, they like both, because I guess they go back a ways, they know each other, and they both start like reminiscing about Noble Romans, which was like, I don't know if it was just local to Indiana, but Noble Romans was like one of the pizza places in Indiana. It's still around in certain places.
Yeah, it's like a Midwest thing, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bigger than Indiana, but
which the thing that I thought was crazy is Jimmy Church in this interview with her is like, oh man, I would kill to have Noble Romans again. And I'm just thinking to myself, Noble Romans? That's the pizza that you would like kill to have? It's fine.
There's that whole theory that like you that like the first pizza you ever have imprints upon you what pizza is.
Yeah.
So like you are tailored to whatever the first like your initial memory of pizza is. And so like I think that's like I don't remember what exactly my first pizza was, but I think it was like Pizza Hut or something. And there's just times where like that kind of vibe fits. I don't know.
No, I feel it. And it's I'm not saying it's a bad pizza, but I'm just like, I don't know. I can't imagine Noble Romans being my like go-to pizza desire. You know what I'm saying? Also,
I mean, I as a kid, my favorite pizza place was fucking Pizza King.
And
Pizza King, that pizza sucked.
Is the pizza? It depends on location. I found with Pizza Kings, we're actually going to be getting one. I think like near where I live.
Really?
Yeah. Which
what fucking consoles do they have in Pizza King?
They don't do that
days?
anymore. Oh my god. Can't believe we're fucking. I love that we're talking about pizza because I was about to bring up Snappy Tomato, which I think was also an Indiana thing. Maybe. Yeah, that was. I don't think that was anywhere else.
I think that might have been like just South Central Indiana. Like it was. It was very very local.
Oh my god. Well, yeah, we're getting a.
Should we talk about fucking Zwanzig's now? Do you want to go?
Sure. Look, that's the actual maybe best pizza I've had in Indiana.
It's
our hometown. We have a place called Zwanzig's, and it's extremely good. In my opinion. Oh shit! I wish I had Zwanzig's right now. I really do. That would go so good with this beer that I have here.
Yeah,
I gotta say. Anyways, all the pizza talk aside, email podcast question of the week. What's a local pizza thing for you that you love?
Yeah, just the name. Like just
tell us the name. I want to hear about all your cool local pizza joints. But yeah, so the story we're going to talk about, like I said, Copley Woods incident. Much of the tale comes from Budd Hopkins' 1987 book, Intruders, The Incredible Visitations at Copley Woods. I didn't read 100% of this book, but I read a good enough chunk of it so that I could understand the details of the encounter, as told by Budd and by its main character, this woman who Budd would call in the book Kathy Davis. Now, Kathy Davis, of course, is not her real name. I already told you. Her name's Debbie Jordan-Kauble. And Copley Woods is also not a real place in Indiana. We'll get to the why of these pseudonyms later, but suffice to say, it's mostly the typical thing with certain UFO and alien encounterers, where like they want to keep their identity anonymous to protect themselves from various people who might want to knock on their door about the whole thing, you know? So it's that kind of thing.
So they gave a pseudonym to not only the woman involved, but the location
place,
at which this that seems like a step too far for me personally.
Oh, really?
I feel like you gotta put the name of the place should be there.
People knew it was a small town Indiana. That much was apparent. But yeah, it's Copley Woods, not real. Now we'll get into Kathy, her personal thing, who again, her real name is Debbie, later. But I want to kind of go over the incident itself before we, I guess, shift focus to her. And this story is about her, and a lot of it's from her perspective. But in part 2, we'll get more into her than just the incident itself, because she herself is very interesting. And just to keep things not confusing, I'm going to use real names from here forward, or at least I'm going to use Debbie's real name because that's the one that I know. But when the story initially came out, everything was referred to by a pseudonym, everybody and everything. So first of all, I started reading Hopkins's book about this, and there is a note to the reader up front that really rubbed me the wrong way. In it, Hopkins very distastefully compares the reluctant acceptance of the, quote, chilling, unpalatable truth of UFOs and aliens to the historical emergence of the true understanding of the extent of the Holocaust, which, weirdly enough, this is not the first time I have seen a UFO person compare this kind of ufology thing to the Holocaust, like saying, like, people didn't believe how bad it was at first, but the truth came out eventually, even despite, people disbelieving. But boy, if it does not irritate me every time I see somebody do something like this, it has happened more than once.
Oh, I bet. It's that stuff always hits you when you least expect it. When you're reading something, there are places where you get into it and you expect it, but then there are times where just out of nowhere you get just like a very specific strain of bigotry thrown in your face.
Yeah, and like, I don't think he's trying to be a bigot, but I do think that Budd Hopkins here is like, he seems to truly believe that the issue of UFOs and alien visitation is like the gravitas is on par with the events of the Holocaust, and I simply don't agree. So like I love these UFO stories, I really do, but I don't think there's any comparison to be made there. So this begins in September of 1983. Budd Hopkins would receive a letter from Debbie Jordan-Kauble, and I guess she had read Hopkins' previous book, the seminal 1981 text Missing Time. I don't think this book is like the first text to discuss the missing time phenomenon. Like, I'm sure this is a thing in like Project Blue Book. I'm sure. I know it is a thing in Project Blue Book, for instance. But collecting these stories about abductees with similar traits like missing time and leftover scars and stuff, this did help sort of establish Hopkins as a legitimate UFO researcher. And it was this text, Missing Time, that Deborah read, and it led her to Budd Hopkins. So she wrote him a letter about her experience back in July of 1983. And so here is what she says in her letter to him. Around the first week of July 1983, at about 8 to 9 p.m., I was preparing to go out and sew a little at a neighbor's home, and while I was standing at the kitchen window, I noticed a light in the pool house, and the door was open. I remember shutting it earlier, so I knew it shouldn't be open, let alone have the light on, so I mentioned it to Mom. By the way, just for context, she's living with her parents right now. She looked and wondered what was up, but neither one of us were at all alarmed. When I got ready to leave, I decided to drive around the turnaround to make sure no one was out there, as Mom would be alone with the kids. My sons Rob, 4, and Tommy, 3. When I did, the light was off and the door shut, and the garage door was open, which is always kept shut. When I got to Deanne's house, one street over, I called Mom and told her what I saw and asked if she'd like me to come home and check it out. And she sounded rather nervous, not at all like my mom. She said she'd seen a big light by the pool house, and it moved up to the bird feeder and grew to about 2 feet in diameter. but she didn't see any beam. It was just like a spotlight on the bird feeder, lighting it up, but nothing else around it. When I got there, it was gone, and I looked all around the property with my dad's .22. I'm chicken. I did finally find my dog Penny hiding under a car out back. Usually she carries on something fierce when anyone she doesn't know is on her property. It's not like her to hide and have to be coaxed out from anywhere, especially by me. She's usually all over me. I didn't see anything, so I went back to sew, and later that night, Dee and I and her daughter came back about midnight and went swimming. Right after that night, our yard was burned by what we don't know. Nothing will grow there now, no matter how much water we give it, and wild animals won't go on it. At first, even Penny would walk halfway around the yard to avoid walking on it. She'd sniff it and run the other way. Birds will no longer go near the bird feeder either, and we have always had tons of birds every day, especially red birds. Well, that's the story of our backyard mystery. It's still here for anyone who wants to see it, more or less unchanged.
Okay, so we've got a big dead spot that everything avoids.
Weird dead spot and strange lights in the backyard. Now, included in her letter to Budd were 15 photographs that had been taken the night of her family's strange encounter during the summertime. And these were photos of the dead grass. So it's a circular patch of dead grass about, the book is describing as being 8 feet in diameter and with a 49-foot long swath, which ran perfectly straight and was nearly 3 feet in width. And this extended out from the circle. And then he mentions like 2 other little quote unquote jogs off of the center circle. And all the grass here was described as, quote, dead and disintegrating in a way that Budd deemed artificial looking, perhaps from an intense heat source that sets his speculation. Now, this wasn't all Deborah told him about. She told him about a couple things that are going to be unveiled here over the course of our 2-parter here. So, she, in her letter, also wanted to address a strange missing time experience her sister had all the way back in 1965. So she says this. Now about Laura. My sister Laura is 35 years old. She's always been very level-headed and not much imagination. Always the realist. Anyway, in the summer about 1965, she left one evening about 4:30 p.m. to take my mother to bingo. On the way home from dropping her off as she was passing the church on 10th Street, she suddenly was compelled to pull into the church parking lot around back. She noticed there weren't any cars around and thought it quite strange for a Sunday afternoon in that busy area. When she parked, she looked up and saw something she'd never believed before then. It was silver, and I believe she said the lights were red, green, and white, flashing somewhat. Flickering might be a better word. It was hovering soundlessly over the lot about telephone pole high, right over her car. All she remembers now is she reached over to turn down her radio to see if it made noise, and then the next thing she remembers, it's dark out and she looks up and this thing is gone, and she's driving down the street. When she went to get Mom that night, they drove around looking for it but never saw anything else. So, her sister in 1965 apparently has a very classic UFO encounter. Hitting all the little things, the archetypal UFO encounter. Now, Deborah's story about her sister continues a bit, and it continues to be really weird. So she talks about how her sister underwent hypnotherapy 10 years later in 1975. And this, I guess, didn't have anything to do with her UFO encounter. She was attending a thing with a hypnotist, sessions with a hypnotist to like help her lose weight.
Okay.
And yeah, which like, I don't know. That feels like a kind of revealing. I don't know what the sort of tenor is about hypnotism in 1975, and if people are just like, yeah, is that the Ozempic of 1975? Is like,
I think it is a
trend?
fad diet. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I think that it, like, I've heard that referenced as a thing in like TV shows and stuff. So it had to have at least been one of those things that like
people tried.
You know how all the trends that like the media talks about, a lot of them are just like 2 kids, one place doing it one time and they heard about it.
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was something like that. It just got overblown, but I think it at least has some precedent.
It's a weird idea to me. And forgive me for forgive me, but like to me, to be the type of person who's like, I'm going to go get hypnotized to lose weight, it sort of paints a picture of who you are as a person to me, or at least a little bit of who you are as a person. And that's like a weird choice to make to me. But whatever. I don't know. I could be a little off base here. That's weird to me.
I don't think it's a moral failing, but I think
that's not what I'm
it's
saying.
weird.
That's not what I'm saying. I think it's an odd solution. You know what I'm saying?
Fair.
Like
I would agree with that.
Not a moral failing, just an odd solution to if she's looking to lose weight. Like that's a weird way to go about it, I guess. Like just pick up cigarettes or something. But yeah, so apparently this hypnotist tried to plant disgust in her mind. I think she specifically says, Deborah says that her sister was like, it was planted in her mind that candy and potato chips, trying to make her like feel disgust about those things. And the way they did this was to make her think of like little balls of fat. So like the idea here being what I think is that like when she would go to eat those things, she would imagine little balls of fat and be grossed out. Is I think the idea.
Okay. I guess like it's okay.
It's
they're
like
they're trying to
prevent her from
instill like a
snacking.
response to her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they tried to do this to her, but this, I guess, backfires because the way Deborah says it, she's like, every time she did end up eating those things, she quote unquote felt better. And so like the letter makes it sound like this was mysterious, that the hypnotism worked, but it like backfired and something strange was going on. But I would like to propose my theory. And my theory is that candy and potato chips taste good.
Yeah, I think like, you know, and you're making those chips that are making you imagine this thing go away. So when you finish them, then you have them tasting good, but also they're gone, so you don't get the bad visions anymore.
And plus, like, you know the phrase "chew the fat." People love chewing fat. It's like got a good flavor or something. That's not actually where that comes from, but like I just found that such a weird idea. Like, yeah, she went to the hypnotist, but it backfired, and she loves candy and potato chips even more now, and it helped heal her. It's a very strange story, but
I was trying to figure out how to work my way into a throbbing gristle joke, but it didn't. I couldn't quite get there.
She did for whatever reason
chewing the fat, throbbing gristle.
She ended up did get a taste for like weird experimental like ambient music after this as well, but that's a totally different thing. Yeah, I'll let everybody pause here to check out Throbbing Gristle. My recommendation would be check out the song Hamburger Lady.
I was going to ask you for a song just to see if you could do it, but you did it before I even could ask.
I used to listen. Okay.
I know you were a fan. I remember fucking going to record stores and having you ask clerks if there were Throbbing Gristle records. And the one place that did have them had was like crazy, the wildest thing.
Yeah, they had like some sort of crazy box set that I couldn't afford. It was also like I really
no, it was a Nurse with Wound box set.
I was going to say Nurse with Wound was the other thing that I really... Look, I have many times in my life outed myself as a weirdo, and this is just another fun little facet of my weird fixations that I've had over the years. So check out Throbbing Gristle, Nurse with Wound. Premature Ejaculation is another one that's pretty good. So
yeah, keep going.
I'm cutting myself off. So apparently this candy hypnotism backfiring went on for a while until she called the hypnotherapist about it. And upon hearing his voice, I guess she felt this intense and sudden hatred for him and felt this impulse that she like wanted to kill him.
Oh, okay.
And so the hypnotherapist is like, wow, that's fucked up. Maybe you should work with somebody different.
Yeah, maybe we need a different technique here.
Yeah. So the letter concludes on another bizarre note, claiming that this hypnotic effect on Deborah's sister would eventually wear off, leaving her with one final strong thought in her mind, which was this: by the year 2000, the world would be totally different than we know it, but it would be only for the young and strong. Which I don't. I really don't know what you're supposed to get from that statement at all, other than it like maybe seems weird and ominous or whatever. But apparently, this was like her remaining thought after the hypnosis wore off.
Okay.
And this whole thing with her sister, total weird aside, but she comes up occasionally. But that was such a weird thing. I kind of felt compelled to include it.
Look, it runs in the family.
Yeah, that's the idea.
They've got weird encounters. So
strange stuff going on with all members of the family. So Deborah concludes her letter to Budd with this. My mother and I have had a couple of unusual experiences, mine mostly in the form of vivid dreams, and Mother and I both have the same scar on our right legs. She said she got hers when she was a girl playing outside. I don't remember when I got mine, but it seems like I had it all my life. They're in the same place and look exactly alike. A nurse once told me it looked like a scar left by a bone marrow test or a pin inserted in my shin bone from a break. At first, I only had one scar, but now I have two on the same leg, about 3.5 inches apart. I got this one when I was about 13, but I can't for the life of me remember how. I used to play in the woods by the pond a lot, and I may have got it there, but I don't remember how. So that's the end of her first correspondence with Budd. And all of this stuff was way up Budd Hopkins's alley. The scars, the missing time, the strange hypnotic regression stuff with her sister, the orbs of light in the backyard. So he's totally sold on it. And so on September 15th, 1983, Budd got Deborah on the horn, and they discuss a possible UFO investigation. I guess after this phone call, like Deborah would help Budd get to talk with the rest of Deborah's family. So like she's living with her mom and her two kids. And so Budd gets to talk to Deborah's mom, Deborah's dad, Deborah, I think her sister, and do this over the phone before they meet up. And this was like Budd's, I guess, initial test to assess the truthfulness of their accounts. Like he talks about like, oh, Deborah's dad is like, if they were to lie about something, I'd kick their butts. And I don't think that that's great. Yeah. Cool. Whatever.
Look, I get that you have to try to confirm things however you can, but
checking off
there are times where it's just like, I don't think that's an actual way to verify anything.
No, I don't. The book doesn't like make a ton of like huge leaps to be like, well, this verifies everything. But it's like the idea, I guess, is like, oh, we're painting a picture of this person and her family just to assess, what that's like. So
fair.
But yeah, it's also like, cool. I don't see this detail as being necessary, but it's in the book. And so from here, Budd would end up conducting a 3-year investigation of Deborah's case that would result in the publication of his book, Intruders. We got a brief summary of the UFO event she experienced through her letter, but Budd got a whole lot more detail about what went down through his investigation, plus a timeline of events. It goes a whole lot deeper than a torn-up lawn and some strange lights, as it turns out. So what happened exactly? So when Budd met her, Deborah was recently divorced, raising 2 children and living with her parents. So she's I kind of get the impression she's trying to get back up on her feet after her divorce. She recounts the story to him and he writes it down, and it's included in this book. So as it goes, it was a hot summer day on June 30th, 1983. You can picture that kind of day, Niall, in Indiana. Muggy, shitty, sucks ass. The book makes a note.
Probably band camp week.
Yeah. Well, oh God. Well, the book makes a note of it being 85 degrees, and that's like rough or whatever. But I'm like, the last X years of like it hitting 90 is like, I don't even, 85 degrees is nothing.
Yeah.
So Deborah had been dealing with some intense insomnia and anxiety and was attending therapy for it, which like that's another thing for me where when I read that, first of all, makes perfect sense that she has these issues going through a divorce. Like that's really rough. She would even later in an interview, which I don't want to jump ahead too much, but like she would even talk about being, God, her story gets crazy. She would even talk about how like later on in life she would develop PTSD.
Oh, okay.
Which I do believe like she was officially diagnosed with PTSD. Like, so she's been through some shit. And she had returned home from her typical Thursday evening therapy session around 7:15 p.m. to have dinner and put her kids to bed. Now, Deborah had a little side hustle sewing clothes with her friend, who she calls Deanne in the book. And so once the kids were down, Deborah gave Deanne a call to have a nighttime sewing sesh. Now, as Deborah talked with her mother about her plans to have a girls' night sewing, she happened to look out the kitchen window and see a strange light shining from behind the pump house to their swimming pool. Deborah describes the light as, quote, funny colored, a white light more like a fluorescent light than the usual yellowish bulb. She then points it out to her mom, who we will refer to as Mary from here on out, and explains how she'd been out there earlier and didn't think she'd left the door open. I can't remember where there was another account of this, but like they add the extra detail of like she had been out there to like change the chlorine to the pool in this little like pool shack thing that they have, the pump house. And that's how she like, in her telling of the story, that's how she was like, I had been out there before. I knew that I didn't leave a light on or leave the door open or anything. That's how she like confirms that for the stories, quote unquote, confirms that. Now, Deborah, I guess at this point feels like the whole thing is kind of eerie, but she couldn't really explain why. And Mary, her mother, waved away the whole thing basically. And so a few minutes later, Deborah has like left. And as she tells it in the story, she's like, she drove like around, like, I think like she said a cul-de-sac, where she like notices that as she's kind of like out the door and in her car, she notices that the pump house was now dark. The mysterious light's gone, and this garage door that was previously closed was now suddenly open. She thought it was weird, but like her friend, Deanne, lives about 5 minutes away from there. So she's like nearby, and she calls her mom again. And she, I guess, like arrives at her friend's house around 9:15 p.m. But she calls her mom again. And she basically says, you know, hey, pump house light is gone and the garage door is open for no reason. And that's weird. So maybe, Mom, should I come home and inspect the place? Like, do you think there's an intruder? Do you think there's something wrong? And at this point, it makes a note that Deborah's dad works a late shift and like usually doesn't get home sometime after 11:30 p.m. So all of this is painting a picture of like, this is like an older woman who is alone when Mary is alone, and like Deborah had like tucked in her two little children. So it's just an older woman and these two little kids in bed, just alone at this place. And so she gets a little worried, and Mary once again shrugs her off and she just says everything's fine at the house. But moments later, according to Mary, she notices something strange by the bird feeder outside, which this bird feeder is about 12 feet away from the kitchen window and 4 feet off the ground. And here's what Mary says that she saw. It was a pale white light. It wasn't real bright. I could see the bird feeder through it, and I thought, gee, where's that light coming from? I leaned out to see if a car was coming, and then I thought, you know, that's impossible. No car could shine its lights over behind the house. And there wasn't any beam. It was just there. It was round and about as big as a basketball, but I could see the bird feeder through it. Then it just sort of faded out all at once. Now that the mysterious light phenomenon had returned, Mary started to get nervous. And so she immediately calls her daughter back over at Deanne's, suggesting actually maybe coming home and checking it out is a good idea. Maybe come home. So sometime before 9:30 p.m., Deborah left Deanne's and headed home, which, again, that's 5 minutes away. And when she gets home, Deborah grabs her father's rifle from a closet and begins to investigate. The rifle was left intentionally unloaded, I guess. That's how they stored it. And, like, Mary makes a note of this of, like, what are you going to do to them? Like, bludgeon them to death? And Deborah's just like, it's going to give me, like, a little bit of a confidence boost in the situation. So Mary says that her daughter disappeared into the backyard to check things out and was gone no more than 10 minutes before Deborah returned, saying everything seemed normal. Deborah then tells her mom she's going to return to Deanne's to bring her back to the house for a nighttime swim to beat the heat. So she does so, and she brings Deanne and her daughter Tammy back to the pool. Now, Deborah, I guess maybe this will be clarified at some point, but Deborah seems to be missing something weird here. According to Deanne and her teenage daughter Tammy, Deborah returns to Deanne's place at like 11 p.m.
Okay.
And that's when she shows up and is just like, oh, come over and swim. And, a nighttime swim's a nice thing, right? But I kind of, the way that this picture is painted, it sounds like Deborah was not aware that it was 11 p.m. She gets back home at 9:30.
Oh, missing time kind of thing?
Yeah. She gets back home at 9:30, checks things out. 9:45 is when she's like, her memory last seems to come up. And she thinks everything's fine out back. So then she, like, thinking it's like not even 10 p.m. ends up going back over to Deanne's and being like, hey, let's go for a swim. It's, find a way to beat the heat. But I find it kind of weird because, like, I don't get, like, anything in the account where, like, Deanne and Tammy are like, hey, it's like 11 p.m. Where were you? What's going on? Like, they don't seem to be asking that of her. They just seem to be like, oh, a night swim. Yeah, sure. Cool. Maybe that was just the kind of, look, we had night swims. Maybe that was just like the kind of relationship they had. I don't know.
I could see, the thing is like, I don't know why you're beating the heat at 11.
Right.
But I understand the appeal of a night swim.
Sure.
I've been known to swim at night, and
everybody loves a night swim.
That's pretty good.
Everybody loves a night swim. I just find the account odd, like the official account from these people is strange that they don't just say like, hey, where have you been? So they join her at 11 something p.m. And Bud's accounts from everybody involved shows that, like I said, at least an hour of missing time had occurred when Deborah returned home to investigate the mysterious light that her mother had seen. She simply has no recollection of what happened between 10 and 11 p.m. approximately, but the way the story is told, it makes it sound like she also didn't even realize time had passed. I don't know if that's true, but that's what it seems like. So on their way to the pool, Tammy happens to Tammy being the teenage daughter of Deanne, she happens to step over the dead grass patch, a spot she would later claim felt, quote, like warm concrete. And she also describes her foot as having felt, quote, tingly and numb.
The one that stepped on the dead patch, or like
just the one who stepped on the dead patch? Yeah.
Okay.
So they're and it's like, God, sometimes the thing that like gets me is the weird granularity of the details. Cause like Budd Hopkins talks about like, this is like they're walking for like, when a D&D when when the DM will just be like, what's your marching formation? You're like investigating a dungeon and they're just like, yeah, so how are you walking? How are you entering the room? How are you entering the room? They like this whole thing is like they like Budd Hopkins goes down to the detail of like their marching formation to the pool to explain why Tammy walked over that patch. Which
so he over explains why she touched the dead thing.
Yeah, which I find like, again, it's like a lot of these ufologist people will they will do this sort of thing where they'll just like, I don't know, get super detailed for no reason, because I feel like it sort of is like meant to lend credibility. I don't know whether that's what he's doing here, but there's a lot of little moments like that where I'm like, I don't think I needed to know that. You can just say, and honestly, I could also just say, yeah, Tammy walked over the dead patch of grass. Like, I could just tell you that. But I don't know. It like stuck out to me that he was like talking about that. And I was like, okay, I don't need to know. Just tell me she walked over the dead patch of grass. Anyways, it's irrelevant. It's not that relevant, but whatever. So I guess Tammy had also, for some reason, brought her swimsuit over to Deborah's parents' place to change. So she then ducks into the pump house to get dressed. And according to Tammy, almost immediately after entering the little pump house, she began to feel nauseous and dizzy. Deanne would also later say that when they arrived at the pool, she immediately felt that things weren't right. She told Deborah that she had the distinct sensation of being watched by somebody, but Deborah shrugged this off, reportedly telling her, "I'm out here all the time, swimming by myself. It doesn't bother me." Which, again, feels a little off, feels a little strange.
Yeah.
It sort of implies that when she's out there swimming, something's watching her all the time, and she's not bothered by it. But Deborah would also describe the problems that quickly arose during their nighttime swim. So here's what she says in her own account in the book. "So we were swimming around and I dunked my hair back and got it wet, though I didn't get my face under the water. And Deanne looked at me and I looked at her, and all of a sudden we're both freezing, though it's about 80 degrees out. It was a really warm night. She asked Tammy if she was cold, and she said she was, so we decided to get out. We'd only been in a few minutes too, but I was having trouble with my eyes. Everything was starting to look real hazy. I was the first to dry off because I couldn't see very good, and the longer I sat there, the more I couldn't see. Everything was sort of white, and I hadn't gotten my eyes under the water, for the chlorine to do that. Everything was white with halos around the lights. It was weird, and I kept rubbing my eyes, and they started burning. I went to the eye doctor 2 days later after that, and he said I had something like conjunctivitis in both eyes. I had a lot of trouble with them. There was even some pus. It was nasty." She also mentions this detail of they're so cold that when she looks at Deanne, her lips are blue. So they become freezing cold very suddenly. And things don't end there. They all reportedly would begin to feel nauseated which I guess with Tammy's pre-existing nausea from being inside the pump house, that would become exacerbated. And they decided that the cure for this nausea was food. So they finished drying off, got their clothes back on, borrowed some money from Deborah's dad, I guess. And he had gotten home sometime after 11:30 p.m. and went to find some late night fast food. And according to Deborah and her friends, by the time they reached this unnamed fast food restaurant, their nausea had gotten a lot worse. And
so they didn't go straight to Noble Romans?
No, they did not pick up a Noble Romans. Although, if you want a quick way to make yourself yards, I think eating a pizza when you're, at least for me, if I wanted to make myself sick while I'm nauseous, eating pizza would definitely work.
Yeah.
I can't think of, I know people, look, there are people out there who will swear fast food is the cure for a hangover and all that. I don't know. I think I would throw up if I had to have McDonald's while I was nauseous.
See, I think it comes from two different places. Hangover, fast food is great.
Sure.
But if I'm sick, nauseous, I can't.
Oh yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
It's two different needs.
That's true. That is true. I guess if you're hungover, nauseous, you need to soak that shit up, huh? With some greasy slop.
Look, I don't know the fucking scientific specifics, but it seems to work out okay.
Yeah. Well, they show up at this fast food place, and everything's way worse while they're there. And so instead of eating anything, they just all turn around and head home. And Deborah remarks to Budd about how strange and sudden all the weird symptoms were, her vision problems, which, only she experienced these vision problems despite never dunking her head underwater. she, like, again, there's this other detail where she's like, oh, Deanne and Tammy were under the water, but I never actually fully submerged my face, so the chlorine couldn't have gotten into my eyes to, like, give me the weird vision issues. And, you know, she's like, you know, their body's becoming freezing cold despite the muggy hot Indiana summer. It's odd how all of it happened just really suddenly.
Yeah, I could see that.
Now, Budd also gets an account from Deborah's family's nearest neighbors, who in the book he calls Joyce and Bernie Lloyd. So here's apparently what happened the same evening to Joyce Lloyd. So on the same evening, June 30th, Bernie left after dinner on an errand with his son. Joyce was dusting and tidying in the dining room and glancing occasionally at the TV set in the living room. There was a sudden flash outside in the direction of the Davises' backyard, which, by the way, sorry, Kathy Davis is the name, the alias that is being used for Deborah here.
Okay.
So that's the Davises' household in the book. There's a sudden flash outside in the direction of the Davises' backyard, behind the trees that separate the two houses, and then a low vibrating sound. Joyce felt her house begin to shake. The chandelier in the dining room moved slightly, and as the noise increased, the television picture turned completely red, and all the lights in the house dimmed and flickered. Then everything returned to normal. The sound ended as mysteriously as it had begun. Joyce sat back in her chair, stunned, confused, thinking immediately that there had been a small earthquake. Her next thought was that she should call the Davises and see if they were all right. Perhaps their house had been struck by lightning. Maybe that was the flash she had seen through the trees. But she told me much later that when she thought about calling them, it was as if she simply couldn't do it. Something was preventing her from such a simple, normal act. The time she noticed was 10:45 p.m. So Budd would also at some point confer with Bernie, the neighbor, the husband of this lady, who would seem to confirm Joyce's account, or he at least confirms that when he got home later that night around 11 p.m., his wife told him that she'd seen something strange in the direction of Deborah's parents' house, something that frightened her a lot. Something really bizarre seemed to have happened that night, but from this account, Budd wasn't all that much closer to finding out what actually had happened. He, you know, had his typical UFO hunch, of course. So Budd and Deborah would first meet in person in October of 1983. She flew out to New York to meet with him and seek help getting to the bottom of her experiences. And Budd theorized that her previous experiences, strange dreams, and this latest event were all incomplete pictures, and so he suggested Deborah undergo hypnotic regression. And so that's the classic. She would be put under multiple hypnosis sessions, the first two of which were conducted by a psychologist named Dr. Aphrodite Clemar, which is
that's a hell of a name.
That's a hell of a name. I looked this person up; they're real. And it's interesting because, okay, it's a little bit of an aside here. I read Whitley Strieber's Communion pretty recently. There is a pattern I'm beginning to notice with Budd Hopkins, because Whitley Strieber, Niall, you watched the movie with me.
Yes.
Which, if people want to hear that, check out patreon.com/itgetsweird at the $5 tier. We did talk about that last year, I think. Movie's pretty sick. The book is very different. The book is interesting until it suddenly isn't. You know what I mean? Like Whitley Strieber's, the recounting the events and the fear aspect of it is pretty interesting. But I gotta tell you, Whitley Strieber's theories on what the visitors are is kind of lame and not that interesting. And there's a bunch of shit at the end of the book where he's like, I'm getting a little off track here, but there's a bunch of shit at the end of the book where there's all these people and people introduced to the story. Other people who he meets at the a UFO abductee experiencer group therapy session, and they all just they all just affirm Whitley Strieber's beliefs about the things that abducted him. It's a whole thing. But the point I'm kind of getting to is, or I'm trying to get to, but preventing myself, is Budd Hopkins. There will be like another legitimate psychologist there, and they will like help do the hypnotic, because I don't remember the name of the psychologist that is brought into Whitley Strieber's case, but I remember again like looking that person up to like see if I can learn about them. They were a real legitimate psychologist.
The
as far
Aphrodite
as
doctor.
well, for here, yes, and Aphrodite Clamar, Dr. Aphrodite is a real person. I'm saying that also the psychologist whose name I don't remember in Whitley Strieber's book, is also a real person. I just want to I don't necessarily doubt that they're lying to me about a psychologist being there, but like it's another one of those things where it sort of feels like it lends legitimacy to it, right? Like, but
yeah,
Budd Hopkins is the guy who will be at these sessions with hypnotic regression and like sort of planting questions that end up leading people to thinking about aliens and UFOs. I saw, and like my takeaway from a lot of what I'm reading about this lady is something happened to her. I personally can't say whether or not it's aliens, but I'm leaning towards probably not, as I tend to do. But Budd Hopkins, like his presence guides people in that direction, like every time.
It's always aliens.
It's always aliens. Is what it seems like to me. So, I don't know. Just something I wanted to mention about the character of Budd. Like, he's an interesting guy. I think we ought to do an episode on him. But like, I think he kind of tends to muddy the waters in these stories. So, anyways, you may have already guessed what these hypnosis sessions uncovered. Budd writes transcripts of these sessions, which reveal that she was likely not alone in the yard when she investigated the strange light that night after her mother called her back. In fact, it seems she was visited by a number of mysterious beings who abducted her that night. And so in part 2, Deborah's story gets way stranger.
All right.
Budd helps her uncover the truth of her alien abduction. And the story, like, this was another thing where, like, I read the initial story and I was like, wow, that's a weird encounter with aliens. And then as I started to find other sources about this story and the book that was written by Budd Hopkins, I was like, Jesus, there is so much more. It's like, okay, I want you to picture this. I want you to take like a long running fantasy series or whatever, and you read the first book and you're like, wow, that's pretty interesting. Interesting stuff going on there. And then you pick up the final book in the series and you start reading it and you're like, what the fuck? What happened? You're like, I'm like on part 8 and I totally missed all this shit that happened in between. That's kind of how it felt reading about her, because that's what I did. I like read this one initial encounter. I was like, that's interesting. And then went and found other people talking about it, including Deborah's own account, which Deborah's still around, and she is still, to this day, a figure in ufology.
Okay.
But she would also become... she's not... It's not just ufology for her anymore. She's also very into the paranormal, interdimensional stuff. She has become a jack of all trades in the realm of the Fortean, and her story is very interesting. So next time we're going to talk about what they found in this hypnotic regression session, and then like the trajectory of her life up to the present day.
Okay.
And that's why.
So she's never left after this initial encounter.
No,
she's gone further and further down the rabbit hole.
A huge part of her character. She talks in an interview, and she's given quite a few, where she just kind of like figures that this encounter was traumatic for her. But she's thankful for it, because without this one traumatic encounter. She wouldn't have met Bud. She wouldn't have met her future husband. She wouldn't have become this like figure in the community. And so she like reflects on it as like it was all worth it because this one fucked up thing happened to me. And I think it's interesting. And the more you learn about her, the more interesting it gets. So in part 2, we will discuss all of that.
All right.
So, Niall, that brings us to a big question.
I'm fucking ready. All right.
Okay.
What do you got for me?
If a UFO happened to hit you with a beam of sickness, what would be your go-to fast food joint to help you with your symptoms?
Oh, man. Okay.
I know what mine is.
Are we talking like national chain?
You can
or
pick fucking anything. If you have to get up and drive all the way to California for fucking In-N-Out
or whatever.
It's like, shit, I just got UFO. I got nailed by a UFO. I better drive across the entire country real quick. That's valid. That's valid. Any lengths that you need to go to.
So do I go for the like actual real life? I have used it for this purpose before. Answer.
If you want, you can do whatever you want. I didn't put any other extra rules on this one. Like if I had wanted you to do that, I would have put a little extra rule in here of like this has to be your real choice. By the way, Niall, but I didn't say that. Or you can give me both.
No,
you can give
didn't.
me a funny one,
but
or you can give me your real choice, or you can give me both.
I don't know what the funny answer is here, but here's my real like honest to God one. I've gone to this restaurant multiple times hungover because it was very close to where we used to live. Hardee's was the fucking play.
Oh yeah,
at all times.
Yeah.
It's the
which that's a Carl's Jr. for people who live in Carl's Jr. country. But for us, it's Hardee's.
If you live in the godless country, you might know it as Carl's Jr. But yeah, Hardee's is the truth. It's honestly, legitimately one of the top fast food chains for me.
Wild to me. I will say. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I will say it has a really good breakfast sandwich. That was my thing with it.
I did that. That was on the way to work. I would drive through there occasionally.
Yeah. But their burgers and stuff were like okay to me.
I for some reason love their fucking burgers. I don't know why.
My rock, my true blue fast food place, I think I gotta go with Culver's. I can't imagine a better UFO beam cure than a Butterburger double with cheese and some fucking look, this is all my ploy to get the doughboys to notice us.
Hey, I'd go on.
You know, it's maybe they'd come on and talk about aliens, but yeah, I don't know. Culver's, I've settled. I realize I'm just naming like my favorite fast food joints, which I'm trying not to eat so much fast food because it does actually tend to do the opposite and make me feel sick. But I don't know. Culver's still bangs and doesn't actually. It's like one of the ones that doesn't make me feel totally like ass after I eat it.
That's because it's like it is borderline fast food. Like it is.
It's sort of like Five Guys. It's almost not fast food.
Yeah.
At that point, but it's fast enough for me to classify it as fast food. Personally,
fair enough.
And it's also one of the few places that, like, if you look at their list of ingredients in their sauces and the stuff, it does say that they have. If you've been hit by an alien beam, we do have curative properties in our sauce. So,
yeah, I mean, and that's honestly a little referenced positive about Culver's.
Don't talk
they
about
do have
this.
healing properties in all their sauces.
People don't talk about
and their
this.
root beer is actually good for male virility.
Yeah,
so like. It's honestly, it's really a hit in all.
I
cannot
categories. Recommend enough. After a good month of semen retention, a nice Culver's root beer. If you're really wanting to bring that male vitality, if you really want to bring that forward, just fucking save that shit up, brother, or sister. Get yourself a Culver's root beer and a nice juicy burger. After you have that root beer, though, you can go to town. You can blast that shit right off. So
yeah, well, that's a good way to leave this.
yeah, absolutely.
I think that'll wrap us up. So do you want to take care of some business?
Yeah.
All right. If you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers, from Stitcher to Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. I think Stitcher doesn't exist anymore, and it keeps slipping right in there.
The ghost of Stitcher.
Yeah, the ghost of Stitcher held us for quite some time, but it has passed to the great beyond.
And you can follow us on twitch.tv/itgetsweird. By the time this is up, it will have already happened, I think, for non-patron donors. But I'm streaming this weekend on Twitch. Gonna play a fun game with an old podcast guest. So if that sounds cool to you, go check it out.
Sounds great.
Email us at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. Look, we have lifted the three email cutoff. You can now email freely because we got the three emails in exactly how we wanted them. So thank you all very much for the emails. And we eat the emails, and we may read them off if you send them in. If you send us something weird, though, we probably won't. Like weird bad. Like you can send weird good, but don't send us like weird bad uncomfortable. You know.
Yeah.
That hasn't really happened very much, but just you know, use what's the term I'm looking for here?
Discretion.
Use discretion. Also, check out patreon.com/itgetsweird. We have a $2 tier and we have a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, we have It Gets Weird TV, where Niall and I discuss weird television shows. We've talked about Supernatural. We've watched Gravity Falls. We are currently watching season 2 of The X-Files, and patron donors get to vote on what the next show we watch is going to be. So if that sounds good to you, check that out. We also have a $5 tier where you get another bonus show in the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV. So you're getting bonus content every single week. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday. And you get access to the Discord where we're all hanging out. You can send us suggestions. You can talk to us about Bigfoot. You can talk to us about anime and whatever the hell you want within reason. And so check out the Patreon. And also, just I feel like I haven't said this before. We have like such an insane backlog of content on there too. So if you're just like, oh, I want to wait until this podcast has like, 20 hours of podcast backlog. We have like well over 100 something. We have like hundreds of hours, I want to say, of backlog content. So
someone in our Discord updates us occasionally with how much content we have there, and I'm floored every time.
I don't realize it at all either, because like I am not sitting here but if you want a big backlog of content, go ahead and check that out, please. That we'd be very, very grateful. We also have a $1 tier where you're just giving us a tip, and you're not getting anything out of it. You're just saying, hey, like your show, here's $1 a month. Thanks for doing what you do. But if you can't donate to the show, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird podcast, because we don't fucking advertise to you, and we never will. We've decided this. We shot ourselves in the foot about this. We could be advertising you, but we never will. So please, this is the only way that we get the show. We beef the show up is if you join us on the Patreon or you tell people about us. So yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for continuing to spread the word of It Gets Weird podcast. I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle, and I will see you in the story of Deborah Jordan-Kauble Part 2 next week.
Peace.